One of them is a baker, new in town, who loves to make homemade pastries, and he's just 26 years old. Not old at all. The other guy, however, 19 years old, loves gothic books, old gothic books, lives with his mom's, a mama's boy, you could say, and he's madly in love with the pastry guy. The 7-year age gap is kind of weird, I guess, but I mean, the weirdest thing is the 19-year-old is a real bloodsucker, if you get my drift. Hi everyone, I'm Rainbow Heart's Villain Thoughts, a book nerd who loves reading gay romance with a sprinkle of backstory slash retelling of villains we love to hate. I've been doing these videos for a while now, and I have to say I absolutely love doing them. And I want to say thank you to the support I've already gotten through viewership on the channel. Now, if you want to support the channel, make sure to watch this video all the way through if you would please. Also, leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and make sure to comment down below at the end of the review if this is a pick up or put down book for you. And without further ado, let's get into the book we'll be talking about today. Today I'll be giving a spoiler-free and completely honest review of the dark fantasy gay romance book and a part of the Coastal Creature series, Don't Feed the Vampire, written by author Gray Brian. Oh my gosh. So Don't Feed the Vampire is a story about Seth, a pastry chef who moves all the way across the country just to open his own bakery. However, he soon realizes that not everything is what it seems, and maybe the moody teenager at his back door is looking for more than just a pastry or two. In fact, he may be looking for a bite. Now, before we continue with this, I do have to give you the content warning. And please listen because this is not a book for children. The content warning includes blood, blood drinking, murder, violence, and kidnapping. Also, an age gap from 19 to 26, which is 7 years. So, if any of that is not your cup of tea, you might want to skip this book. But if you're okay with that, let's get into the heat warning. This book is a 4 out of 5 on the heat level scale. While the heat is not the main focus of this book, there is a good bit of it in the middle, and it goes into deep description. So, if you're looking for a book that's less descriptive or has no heat at all, I'd recommend checking out some of the other books on my channel. Those books being, oh gosh, those books being Don't Let Me Go and The Haunting Between Us, both young adult gay romances with zero heat to them, or closed door heat, I should say, and Heartless, a retelling slash backstory of Wonderland is feared monarch, the Queen of Hearts. But if you're okay with this heat level and the content warning, let's get into Don't Feed the Vampire. So the setting slash world building. This story takes place in a small coastal town in Washington state. Not much else is known about the location except it's a coastal town with a lot of forests and woods around it. And there are really 5 locations in this book. Seth, one of the main characters, his home and bakery are 2 of them. Riley, the other main character, is house where he lives with his 2 vampire moms, the woods, and a 5th location I can't talk about without giving spoilers. Needless to say, though, majority of the time is actually spent at the mom's house, which is kind of weird considering Seth's a baker. You'd figure most of the story would take place at the bakery, but it doesn't, which I was a bit disappointed on, not going to lie. And just to put it out there, the areas in this book weren't really described well, to be honest, with the bakery especially being lackluster, which disappointed me a bit. However, the world building itself was interesting. The book follows the tried and true trope of fated mates and adds a nice, interesting bite to the whole vampire thing, to be honest. That was really interesting. However, though, that was just one part of this book, with the other parts having to do with Riley being quote unquote special, never really panning out, though. I can't get into detail there either, but needless to say, the whole vampire mate thing was the main focus of this book, and I feel some things kind of fell into the background that should have been a major part of the book as well. So next, with setting world building out of the way, which again both were kind of lackluster, let's get into tone, theme, and emotional impact. We'll start with tone. The tone of this book, for most of the book that is, was very much a longing and uncertain tone when it comes to love itself. Riley longs for Seth throughout the entire book, but Seth is unsure and isn't too keen on letting this random 19-year-old make him his, especially when he discovers that he's a vampire, which is a little obviously unsettling. And I want to make it clear, in this book, vampires aren't out in the open. I know there are some books where vampires are a part of the human race and everyone knows their existence, but this is not one of those. In this book, vampires and other magical creatures are just legend, and people don't know they exist. So when Seth finds out, he's really stunned and shell shocked, to say the least. Uh, but yeah, that's basically the tone throughout majority of the book, with Riley longing for Seth and Seth being unsure because of a lot of things. Next is theme. The theme of this book, and yep, you guessed it, as I said before, is vampire fated mate trope type deal. It's very much a modern day, real world, dark fantasy type book, if that makes sense. It takes place in the real world, but the dark fantasy comes with the existence of monsters walking amongst us, mainly vampires in this book. And that is the main focus of this book, with everyday normal parts of the world kind of being left in the dust. Um, and I get it, it's a vampire book, it's supposed to do that, but I kind of wish there had been more normalcy with this book as well. So the theme's good, but it could have used a bit of work, honestly. Next up, emotional impact. As I read this book, I felt a couple of different emotions. First of all, I felt Seth's reluctancy due to the age gap. I mean, Riley is 19. He's just starting life as an adult. He was, 18, 19. You're kind of starting off as an adult. You're in that weird area where you're not yet a full adult because you're still in your teens, but you're no longer a minor. You're no longer a child. You're kind of in between a child and an adult at 18 and 19. And one could argue even 20. You're legally an adult, but your mindset and everything is arguably still that of a teenager, an adolescent. So I completely understood Seth's reluctancy, and I liked that he actually thought about this thoroughly, which made me happy with Seth, but a little creeped out by how Riley wouldn't accept it and was really pushy about that. Um, and that leads to the next emotion I really felt, which is when Riley became full on obsessed out of nowhere. I mean, from the moment we meet Riley, he is obsessed with Seth because of the fated mate thing. And I gotta say, it really weirded me out. I've never read a fated mate type of book before, so I'm not sure if that's how the books typically go, but I didn't care for this one. I didn't care for how Riley acted. It really weirded me out, and it kind of made me angry that Riley wouldn't accept Seth saying no. Um, and trying to, like, over time break down that wall by proving to him, hey, I am mature enough for this. Instead, he kind of pushes immediately, and there is no over time proof of, yes, this guy is mature enough to be in a relationship with an older man. Um, you know, and there is no Riley doesn't care about Seth being older, but Seth cares about Riley being younger. Again, especially Riley's age. Um, and I just really wish that had been thought out more. I know I'm kind of messing up here, but there's so much I wish had been done in this book. Um, but I mean, then there was another point in the book where I felt really panicked because I didn't know how this book was going to end. I always get into reading these romance books with the possibility of a tragic ending. Chalk it up to years of reading fan fiction before, when I was a teenager. um, so I'm always expecting a tragic or sad ending to a romance book, just in case, because I don't really look up if there's a happy ending or not. I just buy the book. Um, and I can't tell you how it ends, but it definitely gave me a panic feeling at one point near the end of the book. Um, so yeah, my emotional roller coaster with this book was interesting, to say the least. Next up is the pacing of this book. Now, there's not really much to say about the pacing. It was definitely fast. Kind of. At certain points, it felt like it dragged on for no good reason. Um, it felt like we were given details that didn't really lead anywhere or to anything. They were just kind of there for filler, which was disappointing to say the least. Um, and the book goes by pretty fast, but certain parts of it just feel like they could have been cut out completely because they served no purpose other than to add page numbers, which, when it comes to any kind of book, self-published or professionally published, that's always a letdown. Honestly, if you're going to put something in a book, make sure it pays off. Make sure there is meaning behind it. Make sure, if it has room to be developed further, to let it develop naturally and fully in the book. And I feel like the pacing caused a major sacrifice for a lot of that, a lot of the things that needed to be developed in this book. Which, again, I've said this so much, was a letdown. Next up, if you've seen my videos before, you know what comes after pacing. Da 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 da. Character analysis. Now, when it comes to character analysis, I analyze the main characters only. Because typically, if not, we would have almost every character analyzed in the book. And this would turn from a 20 to 25-minute video, if sometimes longer, to 3 or 4 hours worth of a video in some cases. So we only focus on the main characters of these books. And the first main character introduced in the book was Seth. Now, Seth is a 26-year-old man who has moved across the country to open up his own bakery. Seth is originally from Maine, and has loved to bake since he was young, thanks to his grandmother. Now, Seth is no stranger to romance and quick flings. He makes that very clear in the book. He's not necessarily the type of guy to rush into things or to just flat out, jump in and out of relationships like a crazy man, um, or a player. But Seth has had multiple relationships, and he does state they've all ended on good terms, including his flings. They've all ended on good terms. He has no bad blood with people he's dated or just had a one night stand with. Um, but he is well versed in these type of things. Um, but because of this, perhaps Seth doesn't believe in love at first sight. Um, he's not a kind of guy that believes in fated mates, fated love. He thinks love should be natural. It should come from actual feelings and emotions. At least that's what he says. That quickly gets thrown out the door. Very quickly. And was, again, the word of the day, a letdown. Or phrase of the day, a letdown. Um, I will say, I wish we had gone deeper into Seth as a baker. I feel like for that being his career and dream to have his own bakery, it kind of fell flat. It was definitely a footnote in this book, which made Seth himself kind of a flat character, in my honest opinion. Um, when it comes to Seth as a character, again, I think some people found him rather flat, or could find him rather flat. I, for one, think he just needed a bit more flushing out, a bit more oomph about him, a bit more detail diving into who Seth is as a character. Um, he didn't really come off as a main character. And if it wasn't for the fact that he was obviously constantly in the book more than any other character besides Riley, I wouldn't have pegged him as main character energy. There are certain side characters who they have main character energy. They could be the main character themselves. Seth is the main character, and he feels like he could easily be a side or background character in this book. Like, he's not really needed, other than the fact it's a romance book, so he is for the aspect of romance, but other than that, he's kind of in the background. I will say, however, he is relatable in the sense of his drive. He's driven again to have his own bakery, to make something of himself, to use his skills for what he wants them to be, which is, again, to be an amazing baker and part of this new community. Um, which is admirable. And I think a lot of us, or a lot of people, I should say, want to be successful. They want to um, be a part of the community they're in, whether that's their town, whether that's a spiritual or, identity kind of situation, such as LGBTQ plus or the church or any other form of spirituality, um, or whatever kind of community you're a part of. A lot of people want to be a big part of that community. Some don't, and that's fine. I know I myself am more of a kind of leave me alone type of person. Um, but I know some people out there always want to be a part of their community. They always want to be seen and heard, and to help the community especially though. And some, don't care about helping as much as being seen. Um, but Seth wants to be a part of the community really badly. However, again, that part kind of gets blurred out as the story continues and isn't really a driving force for Seth, at least one that's strong enough to present itself in a very good way in this book. And I really wish it had been more delved into and more in practice with this book. Next up is the second main character, Riley, our local resident 19-year-old vampire. Now, according to the story, Riley is supposed to be special due to how he was created. He's a moody teen who is really into old gothic books and really obsessed with the scent and taste of orange, which is the scent he gets from Seth. Now, at the beginning of the book, Riley has never fed from a human, mainly due to his two adoptive moms who are afraid Riley might overindulge and accidentally unalive the person he's drinking from. Now, Riley has an inner vampire, which all vampires do, but he has a very bad habit of arguing with his inner vampire because the two just can't seem to mesh well, um, or really agree on anything. They're like each other's number one enemy, basically. Now, what drives Riley is honestly and lacklusterly his obsession with Seth. He is drawn to Seth in this way that he can't help it, he can't contain it. And it was kind of disappointing. And to be honest, Riley fell just as flat as Seth. Now, Riley isn't a believable character. His love for Seth is an obsession brought on by the whole mating thing, and everything about him circles around the mating thing. Even him being a vampire is mainly he found his mate, he needs his mate. Um, this could have been a story about werewolves, or I don't want to say the other thing, but the A word and O word. I don't want to say that, you know. Um, but that story trope, it could have been that. It could have been anything with a fated mate other than a vampire, and the story would have been the same, with minor tweaks to it, obviously. Um, and a bit more weird, I guess, on the mom's side. But, honestly, it didn't have to be about vampires, which was disappointing since this was a vampire book. And Riley drove that home massively. Now for strengths and weaknesses of this book. And I've already said quite a few weaknesses, but there's one major one. But first, the strengths of this book. Now, the major strength, and possibly the only one, is the fact, well, there's two actually. Is the first one being the fact this is a vampire gay romance. Ever since Twilight came out, vampires have been a massive thing. We've seen a rise in vampire lore and obsession for years after Twilight. It's kind of faded down a bit, but it's still very much there. And I feel like vampire books are still pretty popular, especially romance ones. So, but without that, I feel like this book wouldn't be popular, honestly. The other thing, however, is the heated scenes are well written and they are believable. Um, there's about 4 or 5 of those in this book, I think. And again, the detail is really well done. And it feels like it's actually happening in the book. It's not something that feels very fancified, very, written for the reader to fantasize over instead of seeing the truth behind what's going on. I mean, there's still a little bit of that. There's still a little bit of that in certain situations. Um, but for the most part, it's not. It's clear, it's plain, it's straight to the point. With the heated scenes, and again, very realistic. Now, the major downside, which I've talked about throughout this review, is the fact that there's so much detail missing. Gray really gave us a lot of information in this book, and most of it went nowhere. It literally was there and then vanished. It felt like filler. And my thing on filler is okay for TV shows. It's okay for anime, especially. Um, some filler, not a lot of filler, but some filler is. But with books, I don't want filler in my books, especially when those books aren't massive. Um, and that filler feels like it shouldn't be filler, but is filler. I hate that. And that was the case for this book. A lot of what was filler really shouldn't have been, but it was. Now, apparently, Riley makes an appearance in the another series by the author, along with some characters from that book, the series. One of them, in particular, Wolf. He and his mate are in this book, so maybe some of that information is in those books, but there is nothing that I could find really that shows Don't Feed the Vampire as a connected to a series type book. There's nothing stating, hey, this is a continuation of another series. In fact, it says book 1 of Coastal Creatures on the cover. So, yeah, if that information is in the other series of books, it should have been brought back for this book, in some way. So we, the readers, weren't in the dark and getting this filler instead of actual information. And I just feel like we got way too much of that. And it brought this book down so bad. Now, my final thoughts on this book. Despite my gripes and complaints, it was a nice read. But looking back after finishing it and having some time to think about it, it was a book that didn't hit the mark. it wasn't a real hard hitter. Um, it feels like the story wasn't planned out very well. It felt like the story was kind of rushed, kind of piggybacking off the author's previous two series in this world. It definitely felt like the author was relying heavily on those two series to make this one popular. And honestly, I do hope the other books in this series are more detailed and plotted out and better handled. Because Don't Feed the Vampire wasn't. At least I feel like it wasn't. I'm sure the author tried their best with what they did, what they had, but at the end of the day, it just wasn't enough, in my opinion. So, and because of all that, my rating for this book is going to be a solid 3 out of 5 Rainbow Hearts. It wasn't very believable, and it just fell flat in the end. And that's the thing. If a book is going to take place in modern real world, it should be somewhat believable, even if it has to do with dark fantasy. Um, have some aspects in it that grounds it into the modern day real world that are strong in the book, and this book just didn't have that, unfortunately. So, 3 out of 5, solid rating there. Recommendation. Now, I don't think I've had a book yet on the channel that I couldn't recommend, but who I'd recommend it to is kind of the story there. So, if you're a fan of Greybriar, his other books, and you love the way Greybriar writes, and you're kind of on the edge of reading Don't Feed the Vampire or not, read the book. I would recommend you read the book because even though this book isn't great, it's still a part of this author, is situation, their writing journey. And it's also the beginning of their next series, Coastal Creatures. And I can go ahead and tell you by reading this book, the other books are going to be connected to this book in this series. It's not standalone books in the series that just take place in the same world but aren't connected. These stories are going to be connected. Just saying. So if you want to read this series, you have to read Don't Feed the Vampire in order to get the full picture. And if you're, you know, if you want to know about Seth and Riley's story, because I think Seth also appears in the other series this author has written, and Riley appears in the series, the Fated Mate Vampire series. Um, if you want to know what happens with them, feel free to read this book. But if you're looking for a book that has a solid story to it, this is not for you. If you want heated vampire gay romance, because you're just in it for the heated scenes, this book is going to be for you if you can make it that far into the book. The scenes, again, are very detailed, very heated. And I could see someone, you know, reading this book just for those scenes. But me personally, they weren't anywhere near enough to save this book. And I know quite a few people might feel the same. You may disagree. That's perfectly fine. So yeah, Don't Feed the Vampire. I didn't care much for it. I don't hate it. I don't love it. It's kind of in that weird position with me, honestly. That being said, that is the end of this review. Now, before you click off or go away, I have a few things to say. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit the like button, comment down below if this book is a pick up or put down for you. Um, and make sure to give me a follow if you want more book reviews from my channel. Also, on the screen, there's going to be some other videos from my channel, including my current series, the Grim MM Dark Fairy Tale Retelling Gay Romance series. Please make sure to check out those books. At the time of this recording, I have done Little Red Riding Hood and Zell, which I really enjoyed. Also, on the videos that'll pop up is Lord of Eternal Night, a dark fantasy vampire gay romance that I felt was better than this book. So check out that video as well if you haven't yet and you're interested in that book or are looking for a good gay vampire romance. It's not the best either, but it is better than this book. But again, I wouldn't say this author is terrible because I haven't read their other stuff. I just know this book in particular wasn't the best. Thank you for watching the video. I'll see you next Friday with another review. And stay safe and keep reading. Bye, everyone.